At Elena Whitmore's birthday party, someone brought her a man who looked almost exactly like her dead first love. The second Elena saw him, her arm slipped out of mine. Just like that, 1 second, I was standing beside my wife at the top of the staircase, dressed in a tuxedo I hadn't chosen, smiling for people who barely bothered, hiding how much they looked down on me. The next, Elena was already walking away from me. The entire ballroom seemed to turn with her. I stayed where I was, alone. Again, people had been giving Elena gifts all night: jewelry, watches, artwork, bottles of wine worth more than some people's cars. She barely looked at any of them. Give it to the house manager. Put it with the others. Thank you. Cold, polite, bored. Then somebody brought in that man. He was young, handsome, quiet, and his face looked so much like Julian Cross that the room went still. Julian, the man Elena had loved before me. The man who had been dead 4 years. The man whose ghost had somehow lived in our house more comfortably than I ever had. Several guests immediately looked at me. I knew those looks. Some were amused, some were sympathetic. Most were waiting for a show. The guy who had arranged the gift laughed nervously. Miss Whitmore, I figured you'd appreciate this one. Elena's expression had changed completely. For the first time all evening, she looked genuinely shaken. Then her gaze sharpened. You brought him here in front of my husband. The man who had arranged it smiled. Oh, come on. Miles is generous. I'm sure he won't mind. There it was. Not asterisk Mr. Carter. Asterisk. Not asterisk your husband. Asterisk just Miles. The orphan the Whitmore family had raised. The guy everybody assumed would swallow anything because he had nowhere else to go. Elena slowly turned the wedding ring on her finger. Then she smiled. If my husband agrees, I agree. My voice cut through hers. The room went silent. Elena looked at me. I walked toward the champagne tower behind her. Dozens of crystal glasses had been stacked in perfect rows, champagne flowing from the top down. I put one hand against the table and pushed. The crash was spectacular. Crystal exploded across the floor. Champagne splashed over dresses, shoes, tablecloths. People screamed and jumped back. Somebody yelled, Miles has lost his mind. Maybe I had, or maybe I had finally found it. I stared at Elena. I agree. Her face went cold. The man who looked like Julian stood several feet behind her, frozen. I pulled the ring off my finger. 4 years. I had treated that ring like it meant something. I set it on the table in front of Elena. I don't need this anymore. Her eyebrows tightened. Then she picked it up. For half a second, I thought she was going to give it back to me. Instead, she tossed it casually into the air, caught it, and handed it to Julian's look-alike. Here. The guy looked stunned. Elena gave a humorless smile. A ring worth a few $1 million, and my husband says he doesn't want it. Wasteful, isn't it? I stared at her. She stood up. Mrs. Hayes, she said to the house manager, find my husband a few etiquette instructors. I don't want to see another embarrassing scene like this. Then she took a few steps away, stopped, turned around, and pulled off her own ring. If you don't want yours, then we don't need either one. She dropped it. The ring bounced once, rolled across the marble floor, and stopped beside my shoe. Then Elena left with the man who looked like Julian. I could hear the engines of her cars outside a minute later. The house manager stood beside me, exhausted. Miles, why provoke her when you know how much she resents you? I bent down, picked up Elena's ring, and dropped it into the trash. Mrs. Hayes stared at me. I straightened. Go take care of the guests. Don't worry about me. Then I went upstairs and packed. There was no divorce agreement to negotiate, no lawyer to call, no property settlement, because despite the wedding that had once been called the social event of the year, Elena and I had never legally registered our marriage. We had rings, a ceremony, hundreds of guests, flowers, press coverage, a mansion, everything except the one document that actually made us husband and wife. Elena had made sure of that. I still remembered what she told me before our wedding. I can only legally marry Julian. Her voice had been calm. Miles, you never should have married me. And like an idiot, I married her anyway. I had loved Elena for 7 years. Since we were students. 7 years of thinking persistence could eventually become love. 7 years of telling myself she was cold because she was hurt. 7 years of believing that if I stayed beside her long enough, she might eventually turn around and see me. She never did. That night, I packed every piece of clothing I owned into 2 suitcases. When I opened the bedroom closet, my side emptied surprisingly fast. I stood there looking at Elena's clothes, hanging neatly on the other side. That was almost funny. Years together, and apparently my entire life could fit into luggage. I rolled my suitcases downstairs. The mansion was silent. For a second, standing near the staircase, I remembered. The first night I had entered the Whitmore house. It had been raining. I was a child. My parents were gone. And Eleanor's grandmother had taken me in. I had been soaked, frightened, and too proud to cry in front of strangers. Elena had stood on the stairs looking down at me with that same cold expression she still wore as an adult. Then she had disappeared into the kitchen. A few minutes later, she came back with warm milk. She didn't say anything nice. She just shoved the glass toward me. Drink it before you get sick. That tiny kindness had probably ruined my life. Because 4 years afterward, whenever Elena hurt me, some stupid part of me kept remembering the girl with the warm milk. I kept telling myself, she was still in there somewhere. Maybe she was, just not for me. I walked out. 7 hours on a plane. Another 2 hours by car. And eventually I reached the small southern town where I had been born. People say when you get old, you start wanting to go home. Apparently, having no home left can do the same thing. Nobody from my family was waiting for me. There was no childhood house to return to. No parents, no siblings, nothing. Still, I rented a small place in town. The first afternoon, I went out to buy food and discovered something embarrassing. I could barely understand the local dialect anymore. I had left too young. I was standing at a stall trying to figure out what an elderly vendor was asking when a woman beside me laughed and translated. He's asking whether you want to afford. I looked over. She seemed a little younger than me, wearing a loose sweater with her hair tied carelessly behind her head. "For," I said. She translated. The vendor nodded. "Thanks, no problem." I found out she lived next door. Her name was Sophie Hart. The next day, I made cornbread and brought some over to thank her. That was when I learned she was an artist. She had come to the town to paint. At first glance, Sophie looked like somebody who had just finished college and decided adulthood was optional. Paint on her sleeves, hair never completely under control, always talking about someplace she wanted to visit next. She had a kind of energy I wasn't used to. The Whitmore house had been enormous, expensive, and quiet enough to hear yourself regret your life choices. Sophie's little rental looked like a paint store had exploded inside it. I liked hers better. I started fixing up my yard. I bought flowers from local vendors and planted them everywhere. Beside the garden, I put a small swing. It wasn't impressive, but everything in that yard was something I had chosen. That felt strangely luxurious. At the Whitmore estate, the gardens had always been filled with lilies, Julian's favorite flowers. Every year when they bloomed, Elena ordered the staff to cut them and fill the house with them. The piano in the glass room had also belonged to Julian. It was cleaned every single day. Nobody else was allowed to touch it. He had been dead 4 years, but his preferences still controlled the house. Once, Grandma Whitmore had suggested removing some of the lilies. Elena had exploded. "If those flowers disappear, I don't need to come back to this house either." Nobody mentioned it again. Julian and the lilies became forbidden subjects, except I had to look at them every day. A dead man had more authority in my marriage than I did. One afternoon, somebody knocked. Sophie was standing outside in a sweater with a backpack strapped to her shoulders. She smiled. "I'm hiking up the mountain. I want to paint the sunrise tomorrow morning. Come with me." I looked past her toward the mountain in the distance. "I don't camp." "I do. I haven't done this before." "I have. That doesn't make me more useful," she grinned. "You can carry snacks." I laughed despite myself. Sophie pointed at the mountain. "Come on. You came all the way out here. Don't spend every day hiding in your house." That hit harder than she probably intended. So I agreed. Sophie really did know what she was doing. She had another backpack ready for me. On the climb, she talked constantly. Places she had traveled, paintings she wanted to make, people she had met, cities she wanted to visit. Her plans seemed endless. When she asked about me, I realized almost every story I had involved either the Whitmore family or Elena. That was depressing. Sophie, meanwhile, told me casually, "My current dream is to become a famous painter." Current dreams can change. That sounds convenient. It is, she smiled. Life's supposed to be experienced. If I want something, I should at least try once. Then she lowered her voice dramatically. "Also, I ran away from home." I stopped. "What? If you wake up someday and I'm gone, my family probably caught me." "You're serious?" "Unfortunately." I started laughing. She frowned. What? Nothing. I just realized we're both runaways. Difference is my family will come drag me back. That shut me up. Because if I disappeared forever, Elena might celebrate. We reached the top around sunset. The entire town below us was washed in warm gold. Sophie immediately started setting up the tent. I sat on a camping chair and watched her. The sunset is beautiful too, I said. Why not paint this? I like sunrise better. Why? She kept working. Because every sunrise is a new beginning. New possibilities. New energy. I looked back over the town. A new beginning. I had left Elena. But what had I actually done afterward? Run. That was it. I had traveled as far away as I could, rented a house, and hidden inside it. I was 25. Was I seriously planning to spend the rest of my life proving Elena right? Sophie finished setting up the tent, tossed me food and water, then dropped onto a mat beside me. By then the sky had become dark and filled with stars. She folded her hands behind her head. Try lying down. I'm fine. She grabbed my wrist. A second later, I almost fell off the chair. Miles down. I gave up and lay beside her. From that angle, the stars looked strangely close. We talked about nothing important. Food, bad movies, places she had painted, teachers we hated, things she wanted to do before 30. Eventually I told her a little about my past. Not everything, just enough. After midnight, I fell asleep, and for the first time in years, sleeping in a cheap tent on the side of a mountain felt safer than sleeping in my bedroom beside Elena. The next morning I crawled out half awake. Sophie already had her easel set up. The first sunlight appeared over the horizon. It spread slowly across the hills and over my face. I stood there watching it. Maybe Sophie was right. Maybe this could be mine too. Don't move, I froze. What? Don't move. I looked sideways. Sophie was painting furiously. You're using me as a model. Stop talking. By the time she finished, my neck felt like it had been replaced with concrete. I rubbed it. Being your model sucks, she laughed. Come here. I'll massage it. Thanks for helping. Her hands pressed gently against my shoulders. I closed my eyes. Okay, that part is acceptable. On the hike down, she talked non-stop about the painting. I looked at it several times. I knew almost nothing about art. All I could say was, it looks good. She stared at me. That's it. I'm emotionally available. Artistically, I'm useless. She laughed so hard, she nearly slipped. When we got home, Sophie disappeared into her place with the painting. I went inside mine and turned on the TV. Elena's face appeared on the screen. I actually took a step backward. My hand went toward the remote. Then I stopped. I couldn't spend my life-changing channels every time she appeared. The interviewer asked about rumors surrounding Elena's marriage. She barely reacted. My husband is upset and went away for a while. A faint, dismissive smile. He'll come home. That was it. Not asterisk I miss him. Asterisk. Not asterisk I'm worried. Asterisk. Just asterisk he'll come home. Asterisk. The internet loved our story. Poor orphan boy taken in by the wealthy Whitmore matriarch, raised alongside Elena, then married into one of the most powerful families in Easton. People called me lucky. They said I must have done something incredible in a past life to deserve Elena. They had no idea what the inside of that marriage looked like. They didn't know Elena filled our house with Julian's lila every year. They didn't know Julian's piano sat untouched in the sunroom shrine. They didn't know I had spent years living beside a dead man's memory. During the interview, somebody asked whether our argument involved Elena's new assistant. Apparently, she had been seen everywhere with him. The man from her birthday party. The one who looked like Julian. Elena frowned. Her fingers moved automatically toward the place where her wedding ring should have been. Nothing was there. For a moment, her expression shifted. I later learned what happened after I left. Mrs. Hayes called Elena in a panic. Mr. Carter is gone. Elena came home and found my half of the closet empty. She assumed I was throwing a tantrum, that I wanted to scare her into getting rid of Julian's look-alike. She knew how much Julian's memory hurt me. She just didn't care. Grandma Whitmore was dead. My parents were dead. I had very few friends. In Eleanor's mind, that meant I had nowhere to go. She told Mrs. Hayes, he's an orphan. Where can he go after leaving the Whitmores? Mrs. Hayes apparently asked whether they should send people after me. Elena refused. No, her reasoning was simple. Once I suffered enough outside, I would understand how good I had it. Then I would crawl back. Watching her interview, I poured myself a glass of ice water and opened my laptop. I started writing a resume. The town was beautiful. but most of its residents were retirees. If I wanted a real career, I had to leave eventually. By evening my back hurt from sitting at the computer. I stretched and cooked dinner, 3 dishes and soup. Then I looked at all that food and thought of Sophie next door. Was she painting? Had she forgotten to eat? The thought dragged another memory out of me. When Grandma Whitmore was alive, Elena frequently skipped meals because of work. Her stomach started hurting so often that Grandma got angry. After that, whenever I had time, I brought Elena dinner at her office. At first her secretary wouldn't even let me in. I would sit outside for an hour, sometimes 2. Eventually Elena became used to me showing up. She would let me enter, eat while continuing to work, then push the container back toward me. That had been enough to make me happy. God, I had been easy to please. I put on a coat and walked next door. I knocked. Nothing. I started to leave when the door suddenly opened. Sophie stood there holding a paintbrush. There was paint on her hand, more on her cheek. She looked annoyed until she saw me. Then she smiled. "Miles, you haven't eaten, have you?" Her stomach answered before she could. I laughed. "Come over. I made dinner." Sophie grabbed her stomach dramatically. "Finally, somebody cares whether I survive. Put your brush down first." "Yes, sir." A few days became a routine. She ate at my place constantly. In exchange, she helped clean, garden, and take care of the plants. I started thinking that having a younger sister like her wouldn't be bad. If Sophie knew that at the time, she probably would have hit me with a paintbrush. Eventually I received several interview invitations. The morning I planned to leave town, I went next door to say goodbye. Several black SUVs were parked outside Sophie's house. Men in suits stood around them. Bodyguards. I hesitated. One reached out when I approached. "Sir, you can't. Don't touch him." Sophie appeared in the doorway. I had never seen that expression on her face. Cold, controlled, nothing like the messy girl who stole food from my kitchen. She grabbed my hand, pulled me inside, and slammed the door. "Don't follow us." The guards exchanged looks. Once we were alone, Sophie's face changed completely. "You came to get me for breakfast?" "No." "Lunch?" "No." Her eyes narrowed. "I came to say goodbye." "What?" She nearly shouted it. I explained the interviews. "This town helped me. You helped me. But what you said on the mountain got stuck in my head. I want a real new life, not just somewhere to hide." She stared at me. "So you've let go of the person you were hung up on?" I blinked. "How did you?" "Miles, I'm a painter. I notice things." I looked away. "Mostly. Where are you going?" "Eastern." Her eyebrows rose. "That was where the Whitmores lived." "I thought about going somewhere far away," I said. "But why should I rebuild my entire life around avoiding Elena?" "I grew up in Easton. I studied there. My friends are there. I know the city." Sophie nodded. "Good." Then she smiled. "I'm coming with you." Apparently the bodyguards outside had been sent by her family. So Sophie did have people trying to drag her home, and somehow I ended up riding back to Easton with the woman who had once told me she might vanish because her family had caught her. My interviews went well. I accepted a job starting the following week and rented an apartment near the office. Sophie disappeared for 2 days. Then one morning I opened my door and saw movers carrying furniture into the apartments next to mine. I looked inside. There she was, tall, slim, standing in the middle of the room telling workers where to put everything. "Sophie." She turned around. "Damn, you ruined the surprise. What are you doing here?" She casually took the trash bag out of my hand. "I missed your cooking. So I moved next door." "You moved across the city to steal my dinner." "Exactly." I should have been annoyed. Instead, I was relieved. Coming back to Easton had made me more nervous than I wanted to admit. Having Sophie next door made the city feel less hostile. That night, we celebrated with hot pot. The broth boiled red in the middle of the table. Sophie dropped a piece of meat into my bowl. I ate it, then immediately grabbed my drink. My eyes watered. She stared. "You can't handle spicy food." "I can. You look like you're dying." "I haven't eaten this in a long time." "How long?" I thought about it. I used to love hot pot. Grandma ate it with me. She couldn't handle spice, so we ordered divided broth. Then one snowy night years ago, Elena had worked late. The dinner I brought her had gone cold. I suggested going out for hot pot. Elena preferred mild food, so I ordered split broth again. She frowned almost the entire meal. In the car afterward, she said, "Don't take me there again. The smell gets into everything." I never ate hot pot again. Not because she forbade me. She didn't need to. I had spent years trimming away tiny pieces of myself to make her more comfortable. I looked at the boiling broth. then picked up another piece. Sophie watched. You sure? Give me a minute. 20 minutes later. Sweat was running down my forehead and I was enjoying myself. Sophie laughed. There he is. After dinner, she cleaned the table, swept the kitchen, opened the windows, and somehow stole my trash on her way home. Life became busy. Work, learning new systems, projects, deadlines, cooking, Sophie bothering me. For the first time in years, I didn't have enough empty time to wait for a woman who never came home. The media had mostly stopped talking about me. They were much more interested in Elena's assistant. Paparazzi photographs appeared online. Elena arriving at events with him. Elena leaving restaurants with him. Elena entering the company with him beside her. I scrolled through a few photos. Was Elena really in love with Julian? If she was, apparently love could be replaced by the right face. I found that more pathetic than painful. One evening Sophie leaned her head against my shoulder while I worked. I pushed her away. Sophie, stop. She shoved my laptop farther down the couch. A beautiful woman is sitting right here and you're staring at that old lady. I froze. Old lady. She pointed at Elena's photograph. I started laughing. Elena was only 4 years older than Sophie, but Elena had worked in business since she was young and always carried herself with such severe maturity that old lady somehow worked. Sophie watched me laugh. Then her expression became serious. She's the one, isn't she? I stopped. Elena Whitmore. I looked at her. You know her. My mother knows her. Sophie leaned closer. So you're the famous missing husband. Apparently. Her face moved even closer. So that makes me your secret mistress. I pushed her forehead away. Stop talking nonsense. Then I sighed. I left the Whitmore house. I returned the ring. It's over. Then get divorced. We can't. Why? We never legally married. Sophie went quiet. No marriage license. I laughed without humor. No, that was the most ridiculous part. 3 years of marriage. A wedding that had made headlines. And legally, Elena and I had been nothing. Sophie stared at me for several seconds. Then she said, Great. I frowned. What? Marry me. The next day, I found myself staring at an actual marriage certificate. A real one. My photograph beside Sophie's. 4 years I had assumed the first marriage certificate I ever held would have Elena's face on it. Instead, Sophie Hart was smiling beside me. The night before, she had pestered me into agreeing to a legal marriage so she could deal with pressure from her family. At least, that was how she described it. A strategic marriage. Temporary. Just help me get my family off my back. I believed her. Apparently, I still had some bad habits. Sophie took the certificate out of my hands. I need to take this home. Otherwise my mother will think I forged the whole story. I stared after her. Our huge wedding 3 years earlier had had ceremony without legality. Now I had legality without ceremony. Strangely, I felt calmer this time. Maybe because I expected nothing. Sophie came back from her family home with good news. My parents agreed to my exhibition. You won. Obviously. A month later, her exhibition opened. I had to work late that day. By the time I arrived, it was almost 8. At the far side of the gallery, I thought I saw Elena. I stopped, then shook my head. Easton was a big city. Surely not. I walked farther inside. The walls were covered with Sophie's paintings. Several looked familiar. Landscapes, mountains, the town, morning light. A group of young men rushed past me, carrying art books. Hurry. Sophie Hart is signing up front. I heard this is her final exhibition. If you miss her signature tonight, you're done. Final exhibition. I frowned. Sophie had told me this was her first major exhibition in Easton. I followed them. She stood surrounded by people, patiently signing books. Then I noticed the artist biography near the entrance. I read it once, then again. Sophie wasn't some unknown girl trying to become a painter. She was already famous. Her work had appeared in national exhibitions. Several pieces had sold for absurd prices. I looked across the crowd at the woman who came to my apartment wearing slippers and complained if I didn't feed her. For some reason, I suddenly felt nervous about approaching her, so I slipped back outside. And there was Elena. I hadn't imagined her. She stood beside the road, phone against her ear, frowning. She kept calling the same number, mine, the number I had disconnected months earlier. She had almost never called me when we lived together. Now she was calling a number she already knew didn't exist. Inside the gallery, she had seen one particular painting, a man in profile at sunrise, Sophie's favorite piece, my face, but not the version of me Elena remembered. The man in Sophie's painting looked alive, bright-eyed, calm. The sunrise behind him seemed almost dim beside the expression on his face. Elena had offered an outrageous amount of money for it. Sophie refused. I'm sorry. Elena apparently named an even higher price. Sophie smiled. It isn't for sale. Everything has a price. Not this. Why? Sophie looked at the painting. Because it's my favorite portrait of my husband. For some reason, Elena had felt relieved. She convinced herself the man couldn't be me. The Miles she knew didn't look like that. The Miles she knew was quiet, passive. He swallowed insults. He avoided confrontation. Push him hard enough and he disappeared. Into a room, instead of fighting back. She had always hated that weakness in me. She didn't understand she had helped create it. Outside the gallery, however, her uneasiness returned. More than 6 months had passed. I still hadn't gone home. Mrs. Hayes had told her my number no longer worked. Elena had laughed it off. Unless I had died somewhere, she had said, I would eventually return. But now she realized something. Other than that dead phone number, she didn't know how to find me. She called her security chief. Find my husband. Then her voice hardened. And bring him home. That evening, Sophie and I were setting bowls on the dining table when somebody knocked. Sophie opened the door. Several men rushed in. She blocked them. Who are you? One pointed at me. Mr. Carter, Miss. Whitmore ordered us to bring you home. I hadn't heard Eleanor's name spoken inside my home in more than half a year. It felt like hearing the name of someone from another lifetime. Sophie stepped in front of me. Watch how you address him. The men hesitated. She pointed toward the hallway. This is my husband. Get out. One security guard had slowly took out his phone. He called Elena. Ms. Whitmore. Pause. I think your husband is married. Elena arrived faster than I expected. Within minutes, she was standing outside our apartment. Her face looked terrifying. Move. She tried to push past Sophie. Sophie didn't move. Elena Whitmore, you stormed into my home with security guards and now you want to take my husband away. Do you hear how insane that sounds? For the first time, Elena actually looked directly at her. So the man in your painting. Her eyes moved to me. Is my husband. Sophie laughed. Explain that. Explain what? We legally registered our marriage. He's my husband. Eleanor's face changed. Then she looked at me. Miles. That old tone. Cold, commanding. Like I was still 17. Like one word from her was supposed to pull me back into line. You've gotten bold. I said nothing. You ran away, hid from me, and registered a marriage with another woman. Then, unbelievably, she held out her hand. Come home. Sophie stared at her. Elena ignored her. I'll pretend none of this happened. I looked at Eleanor's hand. Years ago, every time she extended it, I grabbed it without hesitation. This time, I didn't move. Elena, her fingers stiffened. I returned the ring. Her face tightened. We're finished. Finished. She laughed, but her eyes had already turned red. The Whitmore family raised you. You say one sentence and suddenly everything is finished. I never denied what Grandma did for me. And me. I looked at her. What exactly do you want me to repay you for? That landed. Elena pushed past Sophie before either of us expected it and grabbed my wrist. Fine. Her voice shook. Go divorce her. I stared at her. What? You wanted to legally marry me, didn't you? 4 years. Those words had once been the thing I wanted most in the world. Elena tightened her grip. Divorce her. Then we'll register immediately. I slapped her. Once. The sound silenced the whole way. Even I froze. Elena slowly turned her face back toward me. I looked at my own hand. What had I just done? Then I remembered everything she had just said. I pulled my wrist free. I left the Whitmore house. My voice was quieter now. I don't want your marriage certificate anymore. I don't want the ring. I don't care who you stay with. Elena stared at me. Can't we just let each other go? Why should I let you go? Her eyes filled. The Whitmores raised you. You belong to that house. Even if you die as part of the Whitmore family. Then she suddenly grabbed me around the waist. Sophie moved immediately. So did the security team arriving from the elevator. Not Eleanor's people, Sophie's. Her family had apparently decided that, if their daughter insisted on marrying somebody, they were at least going to make sure nobody kidnapped him. One of their security men stepped between us. Miss Whitmore, if you attempt to remove Mr. Carter against his will, we will contact the police and pursue charges. Elena looked at Sophie. Sophie folded her arms. You really thought I couldn't protect my own husband? The two security teams began shoving each other. For several of the minutes, the hallway turned into chaos. Eventually, under pressure from Sophie's family and building security, Elena had no choice but to leave. I brought Sophie back inside. Before leaving, Elena had shoved past her hard enough to make her stumble. I pulled Sophie toward the light. "Are you hurt?" She covered one cheek dramatically. "Husband, she's vicious. Look at me. Stop calling me that." I grabbed the first aid kit. "Where does it hurt?" I leaned closer. Sophie suddenly turned her head and kissed me. I froze. She pulled back smiling. "That helped. Sophie, when Elena was here, you didn't correct me when I called you my husband. You said this marriage wasn't real." Her smile became shameless. I lied. I stared at her. "You what?" "I wanted a legal status that would make you stop looking backward." "That sounds a lot like marriage fraud." "Fine." She nodded. "I'm guilty." "Sophie." She finally became serious. "My family wanted me to return to the company. I wanted control over who I married." She looked toward the paintings stacked near the wall. "So I made a deal. I go back and work for them. And they stop controlling my marriage." I suddenly understood. "Your exhibition," she nodded. "My last one." The young men at the gallery hadn't been exaggerating. Sophie had built a successful career as a painter, and she was stepping away from it because she had chosen a different bargain with her family. I poked her cheek. "Are you stupid?" "Probably. If I divorce you, what then?" She sighed theatrically. "Then I lose my husband and still have to work at the company for the rest of my life? Tragic." I laughed. Then she looked straight at me. "If marrying you is a trick, I'm willing to spend the rest of my life making the trick real." Something in my chest went quiet. Not empty. Quiet. Sophie smiled carefully. "So don't leave me, okay?" I nodded. Her entire face brightened. Then, naturally, she immediately pushed her luck. "Husband." "What? Can I officially kiss you now?" "No." She kissed me anyway. We moved soon afterward. Sophie said she didn't want Elena showing up at our apartment every time she had another emotional breakdown. Then we started planning an actual wedding, one with a real marriage certificate behind it. One afternoon, while looking at hotels, we walked through a garden and ran into Elena. I tried to go around her. She saw me. "Miles," I stopped. She rushed over. "Please come back." I didn't answer. "I'll listen to Grandma." Her voice was nothing like the Elena I remembered. "I'll take care of you. I'll do it properly this time." She reached for my hand. "The Whitmore house is where you grew up. That's your home." Her fingers closed around mine. "Don't you want me anymore?" Her voice broke. "Don't you even want our home?" I gently pulled my hand away. "Elena, I lived in that house 4 years." She looked hopeful for half a second. Then I finished. "And you never treated me like family." Her face went white. "I have a new family now." I looked toward the hotel. Sophie's parents accepted me. That had surprised me more than anything. When they learned my parents had died when I was young and I had no family left, Sophie's mother hugged me and cried. She told me, "Then from now on, I'm your mother too." I hadn't known what to say. The Whitmore mansion had always been bigger than any home I could have imagined as a child, but Sophie's family was the first place where I felt like I could actually belong without earning my right to stay every day. I looked back at Elena. "Please stop disturbing us." She didn't speak. Sophie came through the doors behind us. She saw me and waved. I went to her. She immediately pulled my coat closed around my chest. "You never zip this thing. It's cold." "I'm fine. You always say that." She linked her arm through mine and started discussing wedding details with the hotel manager walking beside her. I left with them. I never looked back. Elena stood alone in the garden, watching us go. 4 years. She had believed she understood people better than anyone. She had spent most of her adult life in business and prided herself on never misjudging anyone. But in the end, the person she had understood least was the man who had slept beside her. Me. Grandma Whitmore had insisted we marry. Elena agreed publicly. Privately, she deliberately refused to sign and file the marriage license. I tolerated it. I never went to Grandma and complained. Elena knew exactly what hurt me. That was why she kept Julian's lily everywhere. That was why his piano remained untouched. She had watched my face turn pale whenever his memory appeared and learned precisely where to press. So when somebody brought her a man who looked like Julian, she accepted him without hesitation. She had expected me to suffer quietly. Again, she had expected me to throw a small tantrum. Again, she had expected me to run away for a few days. Again, then return. Again. What Elena hadn't noticed was that, somewhere along the way, I had grown up. I wasn't the frightened orphan boy, standing wet in the Whitmore foyer anymore. I had a job, friends, a home, a wife, A family that chose me instead of merely tolerating me. The day Eleanor's security guards told her I had legally married somebody else, she nearly dropped her phone. When I told her I wanted everything between us settled permanently, she finally understood what I meant. I wasn't asking her to chase me. I wasn't threatening her. I wasn't trying to make her jealous. I wanted to become a stranger. Later, our wedding invitation reached her. There was a photograph on the front. Sophie and I were laughing together. Elena stared at it for a long time. She remembered our wedding, the giant ballroom, the expensive decorations, the press, the flowers, hundreds of guests, and almost no photographs of the two of us together. She had been too impatient to take them. She had handed almost every wedding detail to the staff. At times, she had behaved less like the bride than a wealthy guest who happened to stop by. 4 years, she had treated everything I did for her as automatic. Dinner delivered to her office, waiting outside meetings, changing what I ate, living among another man's flowers, standing beside another man's piano, swallowing another insult, and another, and another. She thought I would always be there because I had nowhere else to go. By the time she understood that people could build new homes, I had already built mine. Some people only become precious after you lose them. Unfortunately for Elena, realizing somebody matters does not make them yours again. I no longer belonged to the Whitmore family, and Elena Whitmore, standing alone inside the house she once believed I could never leave, had finally become the one I left behind. This story is entirely fictional and created for entertainment purposes. All characters, relationships, workplaces, medical circumstances, financial events, investigations, and legal outcomes are invented for dramatic storytelling.